Good day everyone! Welcome to our YouTube channel. If you are taking BS in Accountancy, ito yung first law subject na may encounter mo, which is the law on obligations and contracts. So, let's begin. Title number 1, Obligations. So in this video, we will be focusing on the general provisions under Article 1156 to 1162 of the Civil Code. Sa Article 1156, binigay ang Civil Code definition ng word na obligation. So, under Article 1156, an obligation is a juridical necessity to give, to do, or not to do. Obligation nino daw? Ni debtor ba o ni creditor? So, ang sinasabi ng Article 1156 is sa passive aspect. So, obligation ni debtor. So, anong obligation niya? Pwedeng to give, to do, or not to do. To give, may ibibigay. To do, may gagawin si debtor. Not to do, obligation niya na wag gawin. Now, ano naman ang ibig sabihin nitong the word na juridical necessity? So, an obligation is a juridical necessity because, in case of non-compliance, the Court of Justice may be called upon by the aggrieved party to enforce its fulfillment or, in default thereof, the economic value that it represents. So, ano ibig sabihin nito? So, juridical necessity, ibig sabihin itong si creditor o kaya yung aggrieved party, pwede niyang ipa-enforce yung obligation nitong debtor para gawin yung obligation niya. In other words, si debtor kailangan niya mag-comply sa kanyang obligation whether he likes it or not. Otherwise, there will be consequences. Lahat ba ng obligations kapag hindi na-comply si debtor, pwede ba ipa-enforce ang performance sa court? So, nature of obligations under the Civil Code. Yung mga civil obligations, ito yung may right si creditor under the law to enforce their performance in Court of Justice. However, hindi lahat ng obligasyon pwede ipa-enforce sa korte, kagaya na lang nito mga natural obligations. Because these are based on equity and natural law. They do not grant the right of action to enforce their performance. Although in case of voluntary fulfillment by the debtor, the latter may not recover what has been delivered or rendered. So, let's explain it further. So, we have an example here. Si Juan tsaka si Pedro. So, si Juan, nangutang siya kay Pedro, 10,000 pesos. Ngayon, sinisingil ni Pedro si Juan, di nagbabayad. Hanggang sa nawala na tong si Juan, nagtago na. Now, after more than 10 years, so, nag-prescribe na, hindi na pwedeng singilin ni Pedro yung utang ni Juan kasi more than 10 years na. Pero itong si Juan, kasi nga nangutang siya, binayaran niya ngayon yung utang niya kay Pedro. Now, in this case, ito yung tinatawag natin na natural obligation. So, okay lang kung binayaran niya, edi thank you. Sabi ni Pedro, thank you. Pero kung si Juan, yung binayad niya, babawiin niya, hindi na pwede. Essential requisites of an obligation. So, every obligation has 4 essential requisites, namely number 1, passive subject, number 2, active subject, number 3, object or prestation, 4, juridical or legal tie. So, isa-isahin natin sila. Passive subject. So, tawag din dito debtor or obligor. Person bound to the fulfillment of the obligation. He who has a duty. So, ito yung may gagawin. Active subject, also known as the creditor or obligee. Person who is entitled to demand the fulfillment of the obligation. He who has the right. So, ito yung magpapa-enforce ng obligation, magde-demand ng fulfillment. Third, object or prestation. Ito yung subject matter of the obligation. Conduct required to be observed by the debtor, to give, to do, or not to do. Without the prestation, there is nothing to perform. In bilateral obligations, the parties are reciprocal debtors and creditors. So ano ba example ng mga bilateral obligations? Examples na lang sa sale. For example, umorder ka kay Shopee. So dineliver sa'yo. Obligation nila na i-deliver sa'yo. So pagka-deliver sa'yo, ikaw naman, obligation mo na magbayad. Juridical or legal tie, also called efficient cause, binds or connects the party to the obligation. Tying the obligation can easily be determined by knowing the source of the obligation. So let's explain this further with an example. Example, si Pedro, tsaka si Maria. Now, they entered into a building contract. So sabi ni Pedro, Maria, I will build you a house for 1 million. In here, ang passive subject si Pedro. Siya yung may gagawin. So, siya yung passive subject. He is the debtor. Dito naman, sa example na to, ang active subject si Maria. So, pag di ginawa ni Pedro, si Maria, pwede siyang ipa-enforce yung obligation. Ang object or prestation naman dito is yung build the house. So, yun yung to do. To build the house. Diba meron tayo to give, to do, not to do. Yan yun. So, isa sa mga yun, ito, in this case, to build the house. Tapos, ang kanila namang juridical tie is yung contract. So, ito yung source ng obligation nila. So, madami tayong mga sources. Ilan ba yun? 5. So, isa lang to sa sources ng obligation, contract. Form of obligation. So, this refers to the manner in which an obligation is manifested or incurred. So, paano nga ba nagkakaroon ng obligation? So, this may be oral or in writing, or partly oral or partly in writing. General rule, the law does not require any form for obligations arising from contracts for their validity or binding force. Obligations arising from other sources do not have any form at all. In short, walang required na form, pwedeng oral, pwedeng in writing, even mga contracts. Kinds of obligation according to the subject matter. So from the viewpoint of the subject matter, obligations may either be real or personal. So real obligation, obligation to give. The subject matter is a thing which the obligor must deliver to the obligee. So for example, Pedro binds himself to deliver a piano to Maria. So to give. Yung mga personal obligation naman, these are obligation to do or not to do. So subject matter is an act to be done or not to be done. There are two kinds of personal obligation. We have positive personal obligation, ito yung to do. And we have negative personal obligation, ito yung not to do. Pwede rin ditong kasama is yung not to give.